Welcome to the Daily Vibecasting. Today, Anthropic accuses Alibaba of massive AI espionage while printing billions in cash. The entire agentic frontier is rewriting how we work, and Google's corporate culture is caught in a slowness doom loop.
Right. And if you peel back the layers of all that hype, the actual underlying infrastructure protocols are just buckling under the weight. And the talent models that built these massive tech empires, they're violently fracturing. So beneath the shiny product demos, it is getting incredibly messy out there.
Which is exactly why we are looking at a completely raw feed of today's wire. We're synthesizing everything you need to know about where this market and, well, our broader tech culture is actually heading. So let's just unpack this lead story, because the stakes right now have really escalated from just corporate rivalry to outright geopolitical espionage.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild.
Yeah, according to a huge thread from at Polymarket, Anthropic has formally accused operators linked to Alibaba of running this massive extraction operation. We're talking about nearly 25,000 fraudulent accounts generating, I think it was 28.8 million exchanges with Claude AI.
In just over a month, yeah.
Right, in just a little over a month. And the goal here was supposedly to extract Claude's software engineering and agentic reasoning capabilities, all while completely bypassing China geoblocks.
We really have to be crystal clear about the mechanics of what is happening here because, this is not just a bunch of college kids sharing passwords to bypass a subscription paywall or something.
Right.
This is a state-level distillation attack.
Great. So let's break that down for someone who might not be deep in the machine learning weeds.
Yeah.
What does a distillation attack actually look like in practice?
Okay, so imagine you own a world-renowned Michelin star restaurant. A rival competitor, they don't try to steal your recipe book directly. Instead, they send 25,000 interns into your dining room, ordering every single item on the menu over and over, and having them report back to their own kitchen with exact, meticulous notes on the flavor profiles, the plating, the techniques. They're using the outputs of a vastly superior, highly expensive frontier model Claude to quietly train their own internal models on the cheap.
Wow.
Yeah, the AI generates the synthetic data, and the competitor uses that data to teach their smaller system how to think. It raises a very cynical, very critical question, like if your multi-billion-dollar proprietary moat can be methodically extracted by 25,000 burner accounts, exactly how defensible is your intellectual property?
I mean, that is a terrifying vulnerability for the hyperscalers. Those massive cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft who are bankrolling this entire revolution. You spend $20 billion building a brain, and someone siphons it off for the cost of a few thousand monthly subscriptions. But I do want to push back on the doom and gloom here for a second, because despite basically being robbed in broad daylight, Anthropic's financials are absolutely soaring. At Zephyr_Z9 highlighted a leaked Funday AI report showing Anthropic has hit over $47 billion in annual recurring revenue by May of this year.
Which is just staggering.
It is.
Yeah.
And they're reportedly boasting 70% gross margins and 15 to 20% free cash flow margins. Add to that the news coming from Kim and Ismus and at Synthwave, who noticed that the latest Claude Code update completely removed the purchase separately tags for Fable 5.
Right, which means they are making their most powerful tools standard.
Exactly. They've integrated this massive Mythos-class reasoning model permanently into their standard subscriptions and Amazon Bedrock. And just for context, a Mythos-class model isn't just a text generator. It is a foundational intelligence layer designed to reason through highly complex logical and mathematical problems.
And they're just giving that away now.
Yeah, as part of the baseline package. They're scaling aggressively and making unbelievable money doing it.
Sure. I mean, I see the top-line revenue growth, but as an analyst, I look at those margin numbers and massive alarm bells go off.
Why?
Because when I see numbers like 70% gross margins being thrown around in an industry that is entirely bottlenecked by the physical cost of compute power, I get highly skeptical, like, is that actually sustainable?
You think it's a mirage?
Or is that an illusion currently being propped up by massive stock-based compensation masking the true cost of labor? Plus, temporary, highly favorable compute allocations from their partners. The very report you're citing mentions that H100 lease rates, the actual cost to rent the physical chips powering these models, are rising again.
But aren't those margins justified if they're literally selling the intelligence layer of the future?
Right.
I mean, that brings up the bigger macro debate dominating the wire today. Wall Street is currently terrified that the companies building this tech are going broke funding it.
Right, the capex panic.
Yeah, exactly. Chamath weighed in today, pushing back hard against a viral Nomura chart that showed hyperscaler free cash flow plunging towards zero. Chamath makes a fascinating mathematical point. At a high level, free cash flow is operating cash flow minus capital expenditures, or capex. He argues this is the 2000s era Amazon AWS build-out all over again.
Meaning the underlying business is actually fine, they're just spending every dime they have on building warehouses and servers.
Yes. The hyperscalers are deep into a generational investment cycle. They're spending massive, unprecedented amounts on infrastructure buying chips, building data centers, securing nuclear power grids to build an impenetrable moat.
Right.
Their actual operations haven't collapsed. They're just front-loading the cost of the next decade of the internet.
Okay, so the math checks out, but the historical context is what actually matters here. Amazon's massive capex build-out resulted in AWS, which became a foundational utility that practically owns the modern internet. Once developers built their companies on AWS, they never left. Will today's AI hyperscalers establish that same kind of inescapable utility? Or are they just building incredibly expensive, depreciating assets that get obsolete every 6 months? Which is why you see the ultimate second-order effect playing out right now, the great escape hatch.
The escape hatch.
Yeah, at Shiri_Sh posted this hilarious meme today of NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang watching all his biggest customers desperately build their own chips. Amazon, Anthropic, Google, xAI, and now OpenAI.
Oh, right. OpenAI is officially building its own custom chip. It's codenamed Jalapeno, and they're partnering with Broadcom. They're really trying to vertically integrate.
They are trying to escape NVIDIA's massive margin tax. I mean, if NVIDIA takes 70% of the profit on every chip, the AI companies are just starved. But building a custom chip is only half the battle. They're all still functionally trapped in NVIDIA's CDA software ecosystem.
Let's clarify what that trap actually looks like for you. CGD isn't just a brand name. It's the proprietary programming language that NVIDIA created decades ago. Decades of researchers and developers have built absolutely everything on CDDA.
Everything.
So you can build all the jalapeno custom silicon you want, but if the global developer base refuses to rewrite millions of lines of code to run on your new chip, you are just burning cash in a different furnace.
Precisely. Hardware is totally useless without the developer ecosystem to animate it.
So what does this massive trillion-dollar infrastructure war mean for you, the actual user? Well, all that custom silicon, all those billions in capex, it's finally starting to bear fruit on the software side. The wire today is completely dominated by what we have to call the era of external agents.
We are definitely past the chatbot phase.
We've officially moved past it. You aren't just talking to an AI anymore. Agents are literally operating as your new autonomous coworkers. At Cursor_AI and at Notion HQ just announced that you can now @mention Claude and Cursor directly inside a Notion workspace.
That is a massive paradigm shift for enterprise workflow.
It fundamentally changes how software teams operate. You can assign an agent a task from a shared project board, and it autonomously investigates the software specs, plans the architecture, writes the code, tests it, and then opens a pull request.
It's doing the whole job.
Yeah. And for those outside the software world, a pull request is basically a formal submission of code changes. The AI does all the heavy lifting, submits the final draft, and your human developers just review the work before merging it into the main software.
It's not just coding, though.
No, it's everywhere. At Osan Severo, at Google DeepMind, showed off computer use support for their Gemini 3.5 Flash model. They released a video of the agent autonomously taking control of a computer browser. You see the mouse moving on its own, clicking, typing, and successfully booking a real flight from Berlin to Istanbul with step-by-step visible reasoning on the screen.
And that capability is expanding beyond just interacting with text and web browsers. At NVIDIA AI just released the Metropolis Blueprint VSS3.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, this lets coding agents parse massive live video streams and enormous archival video libraries using nothing but natural language. Instead of a security guard scrubbing through 40 hours of footage, you just ask the agent to search the video feed for a specific event, like, I don't know, a red truck pulling into the loading dock, and the agent physically watches the footage and verifies the exact timestamp for you.
Even the creative fields are getting their own customized agents. At Nose Research dropped this fascinating creative ideation skill for their open-source Hermes agent. It actively analyzes your prompt and routes it through 22 different methodologies from famous artists and thinkers to prevent generating generic AI slop.
Which is much needed.
Totally. In their demo, a user asked for an idea for tree photography. The agent literally rejected the basic premise and instead used a provocation method inspired by the conceptual artist Sophie Calais. The AI suggested photographing only the shadows and the physical traces left by trees rather than the trees themselves. It is actively pushing back on human mediocrity.
I mean, it is a beautiful creative concept, but I have to step in and tear down the underlying architecture supporting all of these agentic demos because it is incredibly fragile right now.
Really? How so?
Look at the reality check at the DXR posted today. All these agents, the ones coding, booking flights, analyzing video, are relying on the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. The glaring problem is that MCP is entirely tied to this bloated architectural assumption of one process equaling one session.
Wait, I'm trying to visualize this. If I launch an AI startup tomorrow and I have 10,000 users talking to my agent, does MCP force me to spin up 10,000 separate servers? That sounds like a financial death sentence.
It is a financial death sentence. The specification practically forces developers to spawn an entirely new resource-heavy server instance for every single active user session.
That's insane.
It is like requiring every single customer in a restaurant to have their own dedicated chef, their own kitchen, and their own waiter. The compute overhead is absolutely ridiculous. As a result, developers are actively disabling MCP implementations and retreating back to lightweight CLI tools.
CLI tools, meaning command line interfaces,
Mm.
like the raw, text-based terminal screens that hackers use in movies.
Yes, developers are retreating to raw text interfaces because they consume almost zero computing power. This whole MCP debacle is a classic case of what happens when an industry tries to standardize protocols entirely too early.
Right.
The hyperscalers locked in flawed, bloated assumptions about how these systems should communicate before they truly understood how agents were actually going to operate in the wild at a massive scale.
But, bloated infrastructure rarely exists in a vacuum.
Mm.
If you have bloated, slow-moving technical architecture, you probably have a bloated, slow-moving corporate culture dictating it, which perfectly explains the massive corporate fracture we're seeing on the wire today.
Oh, the Vercel post.
Yeah. Because if you want to know how legacy tech giants survive this blistering pace of innovation, they might not be surviving it. At Cramforce, who's the CTO of Vercel, Multiple, posted this incredibly revealing insight today. He said that at Google, executives project their status and importance by how slow they are at giving approvals. He literally coined it a slowness doom loop.
That phrase alone explains so much of the stagnation we see at the top tier of legacy tech. Bureaucracy becomes a substitute for innovation.
To fight that exact rot, at his company, Vercel, he banned approvals entirely. They operate exclusively on a veto system now.
Wow.
If you want to block a new feature, you have to actively speak up and defend why. If you're quiet or if you take a week of vacation, the product ships by default to action.
When a monolithic company falls into a slowness doom loop, the first thing to evaporate isn't the quarterly revenue. It is the high-tier elite talent. They get deeply frustrated by the red tape and they jump ship. We saw concrete evidence of this today from AI researcher at Gifmana.
Right, the Google departures.
Exactly. He noted that the top talent at Google DeepMind, specifically key foundational contributors to the Gemini model like Jonas Adler and Alexander Pritzel, are actively fleeing for Anthropic.
And at Gifmana pointed out a really specific geographic shift here, too. A lot of these departures are longtime Londoners leaving the UK entirely.
That is the crucial tell. The center of gravity for pre-training these massive frontier models is centralizing heavily in Mountain View, California, practically abandoning the London research offices. So you have Google, leading elite talent to a nimble rival, heavily bogged down by executives using project delays as a flex of their corporate status.
Contrast that sluggishness with the hyper-elite startup scene right now. Ed Scoblazer posted a wild dispatch from the HF0 Accelerator Demo Day in San Francisco.
HF0 is intense.
It is. It's this live-in startup accelerator that blends medication retreats with absolutely relentless sleep-under-your-desk execution. Scoblazer pointed out that actual billionaires are showing up in person just to watch these stealth companies pitch. He highlighted a company called AIOS Medical.
Oh, I saw that claim.
The founder was on stage claiming $350 million in annual recurring revenue, framing their clinical operating system as the Tesla FSD of healthcare, completely automating hospital administration. The sheer, unadulterated agency and speed of these founders is a staggering contrast to the monoliths.
It is the innovator's dilemma on Fast Forward. The startups have nothing to lose, so they move at warp speed. But, to be fair, even the aggressive leaders stumble when they move this fast and break things.
That's true.
At OpenAI announced a GPT 5.5 instant update today. They touted better intent detection and far better handling of complex constraints for e-commerce shopping. But if you look at the replies on the wire, the user base is loudly rebelling.
Oh, they are furious. I was reading the threads, and they desperately want the older model, GPT-4o, back immediately.
They miss its empathy, its distinct personality, and honestly, they miss the lack of heavy-handed corporate guardrails. The second-order effect of this hyper-fast development cycle is absolute user exhaustion.
People are just tired.
Deeply tired. They rely on this core tool for their daily job, and it's completely shifting its personality and its logic capabilities overnight without any warning. You don't want your hammer to suddenly turn into a screwdriver while you're building a house.
But at the same time, when power users feel artificially restricted by these massive companies, they don't just sit back and accept the corporate updates. They push the envelope aggressively on their own. And that brings us to one of the wildest culture stories on the wire today.
The Tesla hack.
Yes. At Holmars reported on a group of Belgian Tesla owners who got completely impatient waiting for full self-driving to get regulatory approval in Europe.
Right, so if the regulator says no, the hacker finds a way.
Exactly. They used a third-party CAN bus to literally hack into their cars and unlock the FSD software themselves. For those unfamiliar, a CAN bus is essentially the internal communication nervous system of a vehicle. It's how the brakes talk to the engine and the steering wheel.
And they just bypassed it.
They plugged directly into that nervous system and forced the update. And now, Tesla has cracked down hard, permanently blocking those specific vehicles from ever receiving official FSD updates. It's basically like jailbreaking your iPhone, except your iPhone is a 2-ton metal missile moving at 70 miles an hour on a public highway.
It perfectly exposes the modern tension between the fanatic consumer and the liability-terrified corporation. On one hand, from a corporate liability standpoint, Tesla has absolutely no choice but to drop the hammer.
Right.
You cannot have unauthorized, unverified, third-party hardware interfacing with a neural net autonomous driving system. The legal risk in the event of a fatal crash is catastrophic.
I hear the legal argument, but let's look at the reality of how these companies get funded in the first place. You are permanently punishing your most passionate early adopters. These are the exact people who paid thousands of dollars for FSD years ago when it was essentially vaporware, keeping the company capitalized during its toughest production years.
That's true.
It's a brutal, zero-tolerance enforcement of the terms of service against the very zealots who built your brand's mythology.
It is brutal. But that relentless, almost reckless human drive to just build, unlock, and push past the barriers, whether it's hacking a car or extracting data with 25,000 burner accounts, is baked into the DNA of this entire industry.
At PMarca, Mark Andreessen touched on this exact historical cycle today. He shared some reflections from John Carmack about the legendary development of the video game Quake back in the 1990s.
Oh, that was a great read.
Yeah, Quake was a supreme technological achievement. It basically invented the mechanics of real-time 3D multiplayer environments as we know them today.
But the human cost of reaching that frontier was immense. Carmack admitted to massive regrets in hindsight.
Right.
The technical overambition of the engine totally alienated the creative game designers. The relentless, high-intensity work environment just broke people down physically and mentally. And they had these rushed, flawed, early stock agreements that completely misaligned the team's financial incentives, leading to bitter fallouts.
It's an inevitable cycle. Whether you are John Carmack building Quake in a dark, sweaty room in the 90s, or you are a machine learning engineer at Anthropic burning the midnight oil to train Fable 5 today, the frontier always demands these brutal human trade-offs.
The frontier is never clean. It is never perfectly optimized. It is always built on exhausted teams, fractured protocols, and a whole lot of broken rules.
But the result of that chaotic, messy process is still undeniably awe-inspiring. We saw that perfectly encapsulated today as a sort of palate cleanser on the wire. SpaceX is launching yet another batch of 24 Starlink satellites on a Falcon 9 rocket from California.
Always incredible to see.
And deep in the replies, there's that Andy Hillstrand, the former crab fisherman and star of the reality show Deadliest Catch, just cheering them on, calling the rocket an absolute powerhouse. It is this fantastic reminder that beneath all the corporate espionage, the exhausting capex debates, and the slowness doom loops, the visceral, universal human excitement that raw technology generates is still very much alive.
It's the one thing that remains constant, even as the underlying architecture completely shifts beneath our feet.
Which brings us to the end of the wire. Based on everything we synthesized today, from massive agentic capabilities to the fragile protocols supporting them, what is your prediction for tomorrow?
Tomorrow, or very soon, the breaking point between these bloated, high-overhead agent protocols like MCP and the sheer volume of enterprise demand is going to snap.
You think it breaks that soon?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You simply cannot spawn a new heavy server for every single agent session when millions of users start adopting this tech. Look for a massive pivot away from current standardization attempts toward ultra-lightweight, stateless agents, and culturally expect at least one major legacy tech giant to announce an emergency restructuring to stop the talent bleed we're seeing in places like London. The slowness doom loop has a very short runway before it crashes the plane.
That's the vibe for today. Keep watching The Wire, and we'll see you tomorrow. But before we go, I'll leave you with a thought. We started today talking about 25,000 burner accounts, quietly siphoning off the greatest technological achievements of our time, executing a massive heist right under the noses of a multi-billion-dollar company.
Right.
It makes you wonder, as agents become fully autonomous, acting as our coworkers in Notion, writing our code, and booking our flights, how long until those same autonomous agents start executing the extraction attacks themselves? Will we even have the bandwidth to know when the next great heist is happening? Or will the machines just quietly hand over the keys?